So, did y'all know that Dr. King rented an apartment in Chicago to bring attention to the living conditions of northern cities? In the late 1965, going into 1966, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. brought his crusade to Chicago at the invitation of the Chicago Freedom Movement, which was a coalition of 44 freedom rights organizations working to end slums and improve living conditions for blacks in the city. While racism in the South was obvious, racism in the North was far more political and deceptive with contracts and paperwork. In short, life was not better for all African Americans who had migrated to northern cities. Many of them went from sharecropping to living in slums and facing other forms of discrimination. Seeing this, Dr. King's campaign was moving into a new phase that addressed racial discrimination in urban cities, which kept blacks locked in ghettos, overcrowded schools, and low-paying jobs. So in the early months of the movement, Dr. King and Coretta moved into a West Side apartment that was run down and dilapidated. The door had no lock. They said the floors was like a patch of dirt. Dr. King said the apartment had wall-to-wall rats and roaches. So they moved into their apartment because they were pushing for fair and open housing and using nonviolent strategies of the civil rights movement to try and bring about the change. Everything started out good. Dr. King and his boys shooting pool on the west side. They kicking it. They enjoying themselves. Well, that was until they marched down Kizzy, which was all white at the time, and they didn't care nothing about no Martin Luther King. So the mobs of angry whites screamed. They threw rocks at them, bricks and bottles. And yes, some of the rocks did hit Dr. King, and it was at that point that he decided he was going to leave Chicago and go on back down south. In his own words, he said, quote, "I have seen many demonstrations in the South, but I have never seen anything so hostile and so hateful as I've seen here today." He also said, quote, "The only time I have been booed was one night in a Chicago mass meeting by some young members of the Black Power movement. I went home that night with an ugly feeling," end quote. I bet you did, Dr. King. I bet you did have an ugly feeling, getting hit in the head and stuff like that. Eventually, pressure led Mayor Daley to a summit agreement, but the campaign ultimately did not achieve the full impact that the Chicago Freedom Movement wanted because, like I said, Martin Luther King went home. Don't forget, for more Black history facts you didn't learn in school, you could pick up a copy of the book, available online everywhere where books are sold. And if you are in Georgia, you can also find it at select bookstores.